All right, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the schedule. It is slightly changed from the one that was passed out last week. More significant changes at 10 o'clock, of course. We need to address the issues of the contract between Matthew and Jonathan in the city. Specifically as it regards to the merit increase that's called for in the contract. And we should get at least something resolved as far as a process goes as to how that's going to be determined or what the impact will be on respective contracts. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, who has some options for us. And whatever, I think it's fair to say that whatever is decided has to be decided in open session. So
yeah. Let me just pull up the agenda as I understood and Amy put it out.
Would you like to do roll call first?
I was going to say roll call and pledge of allegiance seems more.
You want to do that?
I just want to do what the agenda says. I do love the pledge of allegiance.
Call the roll.
Okay. Councilor McLaughlin.
I'm here.
Councilor Ring.
Here.
Councilor Richardson.
Here.
Mayor Mace.
Present.
Councilor Randall.
Here.
Councilor Runyon.
Here.
Thank
There is no
you.
pledge of allegiance actually on the agenda. I think.
No, there is not.
I see.
We're not going to do the pledge.
And you're not in charge anyway, it's up to him.
That's absolutely right.
It's not on the agenda.
That is correct.
Okay. So yeah, Rich and I spoke on Friday, just to go over the rough sketch of today's executive session. I'm pulling up my notes from that call now. So just wanted to give you all some last minute legal advice before we head into executive session, where I won't be attending for nearly all of the executive session today. Since I'm your attorney, I can't do it during, so I'll give it to you now. So the executive session statute that today's meeting was noticed under only allows council to meet to discuss the performance evaluations for me, city manager, and the municipal judge. It did not allow conversations of policy, even including policy around performance evaluations or policy concerning compensation or any specific compensation conversations, or even really the discussion about the merit issues in our contract. None of that is covered by the statute. And so none of that frankly should be discussed in executive session. The only thing that should be discussed in executive session is how did me, Matthew, and the judge do last year? That's it. Any other kind of conversation must happen openly, or there are other options too. They could be happening openly in a publicly noticed city council meeting among the 5 councilors and the mayor, or they could be handled through briefing sessions. Or they could be handled by sort of in the same vein that council has given the mayor authority in the past to negotiate, Matthew's contract back when Matthew was the finalist for the city manager position. Or when council was going to appoint me, they authorized the mayor to work with Matthew to negotiate with me. And at that point, Rich and Matthew put together, for example, in my case, put together a proposal, and it was on council's consent agenda for approval. So those are the big ideas as far as how that can go.
Okay.
There are 5 alternatives that I flagged for Rich. Basically divided into 3 categories. Council could authorize Rich to negotiate the merit that you all will be talking about here soon. This year, for him to bring back on a consent agenda at a future meeting for action. Council may authorize the merit, whatever it is, directly with Matthew and me in open session after executive session. Or after executive session. Council could authorize merit directly with me and Matthew in open session at a future meeting. It doesn't have to be today. Today is just a long day and you guys are just not feeling up to it. You could always have a discussion item at the next meeting. But if council does authorize Rich to negotiate merit this year, you could still have a discussion on what future years might look like in open session today or at a future meeting. And so those are basically the choices. You could either work with us directly to authorize it, in which case I think Matthew and I would appreciate the chance to be part of that conversation, to be in the room before a motion is made. Or you could authorize Rich to do it. And you could kind of treat it like kind kind of like labor negotiations where it's like, well, this is your limit, Rich, don't go above that and see what you can do. But all of that conversation has to be an open session, so that's the end of my spiel. I just want to remind everybody, when you're in executive session, you can only talk about how we did last year. Did I miss anything, Matthew?
No, I think the only thing, just to emphasize your point, is I think last year after the executive session portions, the council came back into open session, and I think across the board, Jonathan and I would like to be here for that open session. Not only for the merit, any merit direction or whatever, but for the decision coming out of it. So last year, I think that decision was made and we were in the other room. And we had to come back and do some additional cleanup because a few elements like the judge's adjustments and whatnot were missing from the motion that was made. So we just want to be part of that last open session process.
And then I guess the last thing I'll say is, if there's ever any question as to whether something could be discussed, I'd appreciate if somebody would just call me or text me. I'll have my phone in my pocket all day. So if you have any specific questions, I can give you quick legal advice. But yeah, just from the legal side of things, just want to keep everybody out of trouble.
So salary levels and merit increases, et cetera, have to be done in open session.
Yeah.
Discussion now. If it involves the entire city council, obviously that's an open session. If they direct me or anybody else to negotiate with you, that does not involve a quorum, for example, that is obviously not going to be done in open session.
Right, but the authorization to allow you to do that
Right,
would be a motion made in open session.
right,
And remember, no final decisions are made in executive session ever.
right.
The only thing you can talk about when you hit that gavel for executive session is how did we do last year?
Right.
That's it. It's really narrow.
And then the result of that or potential negotiation would have to come back to council as an action.
If they
item to
authorize Rich,
Yeah, if they authorize Rich to negotiate X or Y.
Yeah.
The final result of that would have to come back.
it would come back to council probably in the form of a consent agenda item unless there was some, real exceptional, things that.
But it would be
In the future.
in the future, because we don't have anything on the open session agenda about doing any of that kind of voting in open session today. We could send him to do the merit negotiation, et cetera.
Mhm.
But we can't then come back to open session here today, because we'd have to have public notice of 48 hours.
Yeah, I would say not 48
And
hours,
it's not an emergency, so
24 hours, yeah.
it's
24
not
hours.
not an emergency, so it doesn't fall under that category. So
Definitely not an
that can't be done today, is my point.
Yeah, a lot can be done today, like council can go back into open session after the performance evaluations, have conversations with me and Matthew about merit, and even say, you know what, this year you guys get
Yeah.
50% or whatever,
Okay.
right? And you guys can make the motion to adopt that today. But as far as,
Could do that
you
today.
could do that today, even though it's not on
To
the
have
agenda.
the mayor have that discussion,
You
or
could also vote on a.
Yeah.
in the future.
Why don't we,
Future
I
meeting
think
today.
at the end of the closed session, we're done. I mean, you guys will be coming in
Sure,
during the closed session to talk about your performance.
right, just performance, not compensation.
And that's tentatively scheduled for Matthew's 11:30 and Jonathan, you're at 2:30.
2:30, yeah.
Okay, tentatively. At the end of the closed session, when we're ready to break up, we'll call you two guys back in to discuss what you've been talking about for the last 10 minutes.
Okay,
Okay, is that okay with everybody?
sounds great.
Okay,
So all you need from me is just telling you, only talk about how we did last year and that's it.
okay. Does anybody have any questions for Jonathan or Matthew before we go into executive session?
So, sorry, just to clarify, we could in fact adopt the decision today, or is that right or wrong?
Yeah.
In open session.
In open session.
Right,
Yeah.
we could come back in and say, this is what we're gonna do, or discuss, vote and wrap it up.
You could, but
Alright.
I think to Rod's point, I think if the council's action was to authorize the mayor, the mayor probably couldn't meet with me and Matthew and then come back to you to make that decision today. I think the decision would be authorizing the mayor, in which case Rich, me and Matthew would have a conversation in the next couple days. Yeah,
Couldn't be done, that part you're talking about is not today. We can direct him
Or we could direct staff to bring back a future agenda.
for a future agenda. item.
Yeah, a consent item that says.
Yeah.
Here's what it's gonna be, yeah.
A future
Right.
item, because we have to give public notice, right?
yeah,
And to clarify too, the council could also not only authorize me, they could also authorize me and one other council member, for example.
sure. I'm just using you as an example,
Right.
consistent with what we did for our contracts. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
All right, anything else?
I hope not, sorry for the.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
you been in the sun?
Yeah, we'll let him out of his cage sometimes.
Yeah, I did Eagle Caves this weekend. It was really nice up there.
That's what if you had a tanning salon in your office.
Why you wanna?
Just to be extra clear, I'm looking at that on the board and it says Matthew and Jonathan contractual issues cannot be an executive session. That has to be an open session.
I was talking about the merit discussion.
That has to be an open session, right? Well,
It is open. So.
We are still in open.
Yeah.
Until you read your script.
Let me just discuss the schedule here. It's a little changed since the ones that were given to you in emails last week. The big difference is, I think that's probably. Yeah. I think we're through the changes for the most part. The reason there's an asterisk there with visit with Judge Corey is because that is set in stone. He cannot come anytime other than 1 o'clock. So we may even decide not to meet with it all based on the discussion, when we talk about him. So anyway. He's available by phone, as are Matthew and Jonathan, if we need to call them in. Okay? All right, with that. The city council of the city of Dalles will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602I, which allows the council to meet in executive session to review and evaluate the employment-related performance of the chief executive officer of any public body, a public officer, employee, or staff member who does not request an open hearing. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. There isn't anybody here. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of this session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return the open session and welcome the audience back into the room. We expect to return in approximately blank minutes. We should say blank hours. Let's say 5 hours. Okay.